hybrid guy here, and today we have a very special episode. But before we dive into it, please like and subscribe to this video. And here's what we got on the docket for you. So today I've got my friend Tom out here with his Prius V, and what we're going to do is we're going to do an install on the NexPower Lithium Battery upgrade for him today. I'm pretty excited. This is going to help give Tom some brand new lithium cells into his Prius V, and let's get busy on this install. So before we dive in and actually tear the battery out of this vehicle, I want to give you kind of an overview of what it is that we're looking at here. We've got all brand new modules from NexPower. They are the NexCell lithium batteries, and I'm really excited to get these in there today. I have a prototype in my own 2008 Prius, and it's been absolutely amazing. I have increased acceleration, better gas mileage, and I have longer EV drive time, which translates into better gas mileage. So these are the battery units that we're going to work with today. Now let's take a look at the tools that we're going to need. Like with any good project, you want to ensure you have the right tools for the job. So I'm going to just do a little walk around, show you what we're going to be using today so you can have the same tools as well. You don't need to have everything that I do, but I'll point out what it is that you will need so you can get the job done right if you're doing this yourself. One of the first things that I like to have is my Fluke digital multimeter. Fluke makes one of the best multimeters out there. They're very accurate. I spend a lot of money on mine, but I use it all the time. I would recommend a Fluke because it is Cat 3 certified up to 1,000 volts, so it's going to be safe for measuring high voltage when I get in there and test to make sure that my battery is good to remove. Taking a look over here, I've got my basic sockets and ratchets, and even down here I've got all my wrenches and everything. For this job, you're going to need a 10 millimeter, a 12 millimeter, a 14 millimeter, and that's really about it, and an 8 millimeter, excuse me. So that's really all you're going to need here. So let's go ahead, swap over to the vehicle, and let's start tearing stuff out. So at this point, I've got my 12 volt battery disconnected. I've got a lot of the trim and carrier area, all of that's out of there, the mats. I've got a lot of my bolts removed, and I've got my side trim pieces here debolted, ready to come out. My process right now is to get this hybrid battery safe. So I'm going to remove the safety plug by pulling out, away, and removing it out of the vehicle. I'm going to set it somewhere safe so nobody accidentally puts that back in. From here, what I'm going to do is disconnect all of my computers, disconnect anything electrical, and then I'm going to take out all of my mounting bolts, and then we're going to get this battery out and onto the table.
So my first step in getting this hybrid battery out, I'm going to remove this side panel so I can access all of the connectors and everything on this side. So that's what I'm going to do first. They can be a little stubborn sometimes, so be gentle with them and just give them a good tug and they should come right out. So with removing this panel, sometimes it can be tricky. What I'm going to do is remove this seatbelt anchor down here, and behind this panel right there, I believe there's a bolt. Now I'm going to go ahead and check all this to make sure that there's nothing else holding here, because the last thing I want to do is tear up any plastic while removing this. So we're going to take out that bolt, check behind the panel, and get this whole section to come right out. So I took my seatbelt anchor out, which you could leave it in there. I took it out because it made it easier to move this panel around. Now while I was pulling on this, I felt some resistance, and whenever I do that, I stop. I want to make sure I'm not going to rip anything out. So I've got my little 90-degree pick. I'm just going to come right in here like that, and sure enough, 10mm bolt right there that I need to get out. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that and get this panel out of the way. So one tool that you're going to have that I failed to mention to you earlier is a trim removal tool. This is also a tool that you can use to remove the clips and stuff that you're going to find, like on your battery, right here, on the fan, and even these little blue clips right down here. Okay, this tool makes it easy so you don't tear up the clips and you can reuse them. Otherwise they're a pain to get out and you usually end up breaking them. I'll put a link in the description below so you know where to get this tool and make your job a lot easier. So what our next step is going to be with our fancy little tool here is we're going to take out this ducting on the upper exhaust port and on the intake fan. We're going to go ahead and use our special little tool for our main disconnect. We have a disconnection up here we need to do too, which is this guy right here. Then what we'll do is use our tool, disconnect all these plugs. You'll slide it under like that. If I can get it in the right spot, that would help. And gently pry these up and out of their holding place just like that. So we're going to remove some plugs, and we'll come down, remove all these other plugs as well, and just get all of this out of the way. So we can go over to our main harness inlet for the battery and get that disconnected and move the battery out of the car. So I've got all these wires disconnected. I've got my top duct out. What we need to do from here, because I don't really want to disrupt my intake port, is I need to get this cover off and disconnect at the high voltage battery terminals. Once I do that, I can remove all the main bolts on the chassis. We can slide this forward and leave our ducting in place. That way the battery can come right out. We're not disrupting the carpet or anything like that at this time because we don't really need to. This is a simple and clean way to do that. Things we will need: the main service disconnect. Has a little nub right here on top, and we need that to go right into this hole right here. Well, let me show you how this works. It goes in right here, then you twist it and it pops up like that. Pinch the sides and it comes right out. Set it down and you're ready to take out the 1, 2, 3, and 4 nuts, and this cover will lift right off. So the 4 bolts, the nuts that I just took out, are here, here, and then right here. We'll get some light on this for you. Right here, and then the one right there. So take those 4 out, and then what we can do is take that cover off. From here, what I'm going to do is get my multimeter, and I'm going to test to make sure I've got no voltage at these terminals, because the last thing anybody needs is to have an episode where they get shocked. So just going to ensure that we're safe. So let me grab my multimeter and we'll test those terminals. Now before I actually use my meter, I want to give you a little walk around on what my meter is. I have a Fluke 885, which is an automotive multimeter, and the reason I'm using this particular one is because it is Cat 3 rated up to 1000 volts and Cat 4 rated up to 600 volts. My tips here, the reason they can go up to that rating is because when you twist them like this, the little sheath comes down and protects all that exposed space. Really all we need to do is measure with a nice tip that we can get with these meter leads. So I'm going to pack this up, get it over to the car, and then what we're going to do is set the meter to DC volts and then we're going to measure at our terminals to ensure we have no voltage and that we're good to go ahead and disconnect.
All right, so I've got my meter set up inside the vehicle. Now, you want to make sure that your meter's working. So if you, I know right now that there's no voltage at those terminals, but you might not. So I want to know that my meter's working, and I'm going to use this battery right here and test. See how it shows on the meter that I've got 12.77 volts? I know that my meter is working. So hold on just a second while I walk around the car, and I'm going to measure at these meter leads, and we'll make sure that we have no voltage so we can go ahead and unbolt those leads to the high voltage battery. So I've got a large black wire right here, and I've got basically my positive wire here. I'm going to go ahead and put my meter leads right on these cables, and as you can see, there's no voltage. I'm good to go ahead and unbolt these right here, set them out of the way, then I'll get the chassis bolts for the battery out as well. We'll slide this battery out, get it on the table, and start disassembling.
Alright, so something you may not have been able to see is where all these chassis bolts are. There's two here, one here in the front, one here in the front, then there's four more, two on this side here and two on this side here. They're all going to use a 12mm socket. What I did to make this simpler is I took a bigger ratchet and a 12mm socket and just broke them loose and ran them out quickly with my gun. Just a little helpful hint if you want to make this process easier. So I've got my terminals here disconnected, got all the chassis bolts out, got the wiring harness disconnected. Now what me and Tom are going to do is we're going to set the camera up so we can move this battery and get it out on the table.
Alright, so we've got the battery out of the vehicle, and what we're going to do now, one thing I wanted to point out is that this little clip kind of interfered with this. Now you can lift up this tab here and kind of pop it out, or you can remove it by pinching right here and sliding that out of the way. That way these cables can come off of the battery chassis. So what we're going to do next here is we've got to open up this case. We've already confirmed that there's no voltage at our terminals, but we still need to be safe. So we're going to go ahead and take all of our nuts off here on both sides and the top of the case here. Get all these nuts here. And that we're also going to need to use our service plug again to get this little safety disconnect out of the way. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we're going to expose all of the battery modules that are inside, and then we'll go from there. Alright, so we've got our battery cover off, we've got this thing exposed. One of the first things that we need to do, because this is an upgraded battery, we're actually going to be using less bus bars and a whole less one side of this battery, because these next cell batteries, what they are is essentially two of these modules together. Alright, so
we're going to be losing an entire set of bus bars, but we need to mark where the special blade, which is these two, right, because they are the connection to our main disconnect here. We need to mark where this one goes, so as we assemble the battery, we can put that special blade back in its spot. I've just got a silver marker that I'm going to mark these two right here, and then I'm also going to mark that it needs to go right here. And it's kind of a light marking, but I can see it. You may want to use a black marker. I'm going to see if I can find one just to make sure that I don't forget it. But we're going to put our special blade right here, and what's going to happen from here is I'm going to pull all of these covers off. There's going to be a bunch of 8mm nuts under here. So I'm going to take all of those off. Do not soak them in vinegar. They have a special coating on them, and it will ruin the nuts, and they will get corroded if you were to reuse those nuts. What I've got here is just some distilled white vinegar, and I've already got some bus bars soaking that I had previously. We're going to get all of our bus bars in the vinegar solution. We're going to get them cleaned up so they're nice and shiny copper clean. And then what we will do is continue to remove and stack all of these modules in a place. That way, as we put this battery back together, we'll have clean bus bars, we'll have everything lined up and ready to go. Tools that I'm going to need at this point are a 90-degree angled pick, because I'm going to be popping these clips off to expose the bus bars. I've got an 8mm socket on my gun to take the nuts off really quickly. We're going to get in here and zip those off really quick and get this battery disassembled. What's really important here is I remember there's little clips on these covers right in the inside. So if it feels like there's some resistance, get your pick in there, lift up, and it will come right off. At this point, I'm going to speed the video up, and we're going to take all the nuts off on both sides. We're going to separate all the bus bars and nuts. Then we'll stop, flip this thing over, and we'll get all the bottom side hardware taken out, and then we can remove this whole pack, and we can start doing the rest of our process. Alright, so we've got all of our bus bars stripped down. One thing that is kind of unique about a Prius V or a Generation 3 battery is that these batteries have two different trays. The new design has improved airflow, but that doesn't matter much. What we need to do here is focus on getting the battery apart. We will need to remove the 10mm nuts under the battery and the chassis, and after that, we need to come up to the top, disconnect our temp sensors. I've marked this rod specifically as we've put our NexPower battery in. We want to make sure we're putting our temperature sensors in the correct spots. So I'm going to disconnect those, separate the trays from each other, and then I'll just peel the harness back and set it off to the side. So if you want to clean your bus bars, you have to get them out of their pouches. There are tabs right here that you can get them with your angle pick and they will pop right out. I'm going to hand this over to Tom and let him pull all the bus bars out. I want to get all of them cleaned up so when we put our new power source in, we will have clean and polished bus bars that will flow electricity like we want them to. So again, it's easy to pop these bus bars out. Something to note here is that these particular bus bars have a flat edge and a curved side. The flat edge goes upwards from the wire holders, so they would be facing just like this on the battery. Just remember that the flat edge goes up when you put it back together. So what I'm going to do at this point is remove the sensors. The tabs on each side pop out like that. You can see the tabs that connect right here at the top of the module. I'm going to go ahead and move these out of the way. Be sure not to damage these. If you do, it will set a trouble code. We want to avoid doing that, and then the computer can't see what the battery temps are. You can use your pick or trim removal tool to pop them out just like this. After you get them all out of the clips, move them over to the end caps, loosen the 4 bolts, which use a 12mm socket, get them taken off, and then out of the way. Okay, we are halfway done at this point. All the battery modules are out and they're sitting here in this box in a safe place. Taking a look at the battery chassis, it is pretty clean. All the bus bars are getting cleaned right now, so what I am going to start doing is setting the modules in place where the other ones were and getting them bolted back down into the chassis. So what we are going to be doing as far as putting nuts and bolts back in is with this new battery, we actually do not need these extra set of bus bars. If you notice, these are much thicker than those. So one of these is 2 nickel metal hydride modules put together. So we only need one side of bus bars cleaned. That makes even less weight when you put this battery back in. So I'm going to go ahead and start setting these back in and get them positioned. Then I will show you how to bolt it all together. So I stopped this process because if you remember our marking, we need to make sure we put our special module right there. So this is where the main disconnect will connect to. That way, when we put the rest of the modules in, this battery will turn out the way we want it to. I want to show everyone something here that will make the process much easier about these end caps. They have little tabs at the bottom, and these tabs need to go in those holes right there. It can kind of be tricky. Do not force the end cap on, align the holes, and use the bolts to help with that. If you just force it on, you'll end up breaking the tabs off, and then it won't fit as tight as it needs to. That being said, if you look under the chassis, you'll see all of these threaded holes need to be lined up so the modules can be secured in the tray. You will need to do this process on both sides. I'm going to get this battery clamped back together so we can put all the hardware back in and keep continuing with assembly. So just to recap on these end caps, thread all the bolts in and leave the end cap loose. That way, as you start to tighten the bolts, the holes and the tabs will align. We want everything to be nice and flush as we tighten it together. I leave all the bolts loose on both sides until all the bolts are started. That way, when it all gets assembled, everything will go into place nice and evenly. Then I will tighten all the bolts down and we can install the rest of the hardware. Okay, so I've got the last bolt tightened on both my end caps. There's no strange gaps or anything like that. All the parts are nice and tight, which means my battery is locked together. Now we can confirm that all of our underside holes are lined up. Everything is looking good here. All the holes are lining up. The sign of good craftsmanship. Let's get all the rest of the hardware in and finish the install of this battery. For those of you NexPower users that need to, for your temp sensors, you may need to drill a hole for your sensors. Use a 15/64 drill bit and drill a hole long enough for the probe to go down into the battery. We will need to drill a hole in each of our 3 spots where the temperature probes go. That way, the sensors can read the battery temperature. Okay, Tom got us some great results. He cleaned all of the bus bars and they are nice and shiny. These bus bars were not bad, but if we're overhauling this battery, we need to start it off right. Now I'm going to get the camera set down and put all these bus bars back on, prop up the sides of the battery and put all those bolts back in with our 8mm socket on both sides. Then I will transition over to putting all the bus bars back in the holders, and remember, the flat side goes up. They will snap in pretty easily. If you take a look at the tabs, you can see where they will go. Once the battery is reassembled, we will put the brace back on with the 10mm nuts. Then we will get the cover back on, put the temp sensor probes in before that, and then the battery will be ready to go in the car. Okay, the bus bars are installed. This battery now weighs half of what it used to, which makes it easier for me to move around. Lithium is much lighter than nickel metal. So what I did is move the battery on the table so it can hang off over the edge and make it easy to install the nuts and bolts on the battery modules. I'll put them on this side, then flip it around and put them on the other side. If you watched what I was doing, I started all the bolts by hand. The reason that I did that is even though these are all lined up, some of the holes needed a little persuasion to make them fit perfectly. So I got a hammer and gently tapped the battery into place. Nothing was hurt or damaged, but you should be able to start all the bolts by hand and then tighten them down. So the bolts are still loose on both sides, but once they are all started, they will line up exactly the way I want them to, and they will have a nice, clean, factory fit and finish. At this point, I'll turn the battery up on its side to finish installing a couple of difficult bolts, and then I'll get them all zipped down and put the bus bars on. Okay, all the 8mm bolts are in and snug. Don't tighten them down too much, they just need to be snug, and it's very crucial that you do not over tighten the nuts on the bus bars. Everything is in and looks like it was done in the factory. All the sensors are in. Now I will take the plastic nuts off and install the 8mm nuts on both sides. Again, it is crucial you do not over tighten these nuts. Get them down and give them just a little slight snug torque. This was really critical with nickel metal because over tightening them could cause the modules to leak electrolyte. So we're avoiding damage to our new lithium pack, but taking precautions so we do not damage the new terminals. Okay, so I want to show you what I mean by tightening these down. Once the ratchet kind of stops, just give them a little boop, just like that, just a little tweak, like so. I'm not cranking these nuts down or anything like that, so it's nice and easy, and we're done. All the bus bars are back on. I'm going to put the cover on and get this battery back in the car. A couple of things I didn't show was putting this brace back on. Remember, we've got a few 10mm nuts that go under the chassis, and then we have a couple of bolts that go right there to hold it in place. This brace is critical because it allows us to have the battery bolted into the chassis of the car. Also, get the covers back on the bus bars. The longer or taller covers go on, and the longer portion goes right here, and the shorter side goes over there. At this point, I can put the cover back on and we can set the battery in the car. Alright, this battery's back together and I'm excited to get this into Tom's car and get this going. And you know what? It's half the weight it used to be. So I feel comfortable lifting this battery back into the car, which I'm going to do right now. It's critical when you're coming in here to make sure you're keeping all your electrical connections out of the way. Now, we left our intake ducting for our fan right here and kind of fixed, so we're just going to back that up, mate it up, and then hook everything up. Cool. We've got this thing set in here, so what I'm going to do is just put it back together. I'm going to hook up all my connectors, I'm going to run my high voltage wiring, put all the panels and everything back, and get Tom's car back on the road. Okay, here we go. Ready light is on. That is a great sign. Now let's drive it out of here and see how we do. Engine is on, and so far so good. If there was a problem with the high voltage system, it would more than likely appear instantly. I'm going to call this a successful install, and I think it's time we let Tom go home. And there you have it, a successful install of a NexPower battery system. Tom will enjoy all the benefits from this lithium upgrade, including better EV range, longer and more concise acceleration, and of course, better miles per gallon. If you want to upgrade your Prius, make sure you click the link in the description and get your pack order today. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next episode.